Tonight, new questions about who was in the know from an MP who says his family was targeted by Beijing. The call to expel a Chinese diplomat.
This individual needs to be sent packing.
There will be consequences.
Heated words over allegations of foreign interference. The monarch and a historic meeting with Indigenous leaders from Canada.
We require accountability.
The push to carve a new path of reconciliation with the Crown. And when hockey fans root for the rivals.
Somebody happened to notice that that's the same two people that were there last week.
A father-daughter duo team up to take down the Leafs.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina, reporting tonight from London.
The bustling streets of London, where dignitaries from around the world are arriving for the coronation. Good evening, everyone. The Prime Minister will be here, so will the Vice President of China, just as tensions are rising between both countries once again. Canada summoned the Chinese ambassador today over allegations Beijing targeted the family of a Canadian MP. But that member of Parliament says Ottawa needs to go much further and that the Prime Minister's timeline doesn't add up. CTV's senior political correspondent Glenn McGregor starts us off.
His Excellency Pei Wu-Zong.
China's top diplomat in Canada today was the subject of a formal rebuke.
I have instructed my deputy minister to summon the Chinese ambassador. He will convey to him directly that we will not tolerate any form of foreign interference.
Conservative MP Michael Chong demanded to know why the government didn't go farther.
You have given accreditation to a diplomat here who is using his diplomatic immunity to target not just me and my family, but other members of Parliament.
The opposition wants Mélanie Joly to expel the diplomat reportedly involved in targeting his family over his vote to denounce China's treatment of ethnic minorities.
Of course, Michael, I understand your frustration and I understand your anger.
We haven't expelled a single PRC diplomat.
Joly said the government has to first consider the potential for Chinese retaliation.
These interests, including economic interests, consular interests, and also diplomatic interests will be
Minister, I can't think of any
affected,
interest.
and therefore, no,
Minister,
Michael, I just want to finish my answer.
An interest of particular concern is the fate of Canadians currently imprisoned in China.
What she is conscious of is that we have 3 Canadians in China that are facing the death penalty.
Earlier today, Chong says he got a call from Jody Thomas, the Prime Minister's National Security and Intelligence Advisor. He says she told him a CSIS report about China's attempt to intimidate him and other MPs had been circulated in upper levels of government.
We do know it was sent to the relevant departments and that it was sent to the NSIA in the Privy Council office.
That admission appears to contradict the Prime Minister's claim only yesterday.
We asked what happened to that information. Was it ever briefed up out of CSIS? It was not.
Today, the government insisted that neither Justin Trudeau nor his top ministers knew about the report until this week.
As soon as we were informed about this issue, which was Monday of earlier this week, we reached out to him directly.
So far, CSIS is not saying how many other MPs besides Chong were subject to interference attempts, but in a report table today, the spy agency said it gave security briefings to 49 MPs just last year. Omar.
All right, Glenn McGregor in Ottawa tonight. Glenn, thank you. 35,000 Revenue Canada workers are back on the job after an agreement was made to end the 2-week strike.
We're expecting a bit better, but given the circumstances, we got the best possible deal.
That includes a 12% pay raise over 4 years and a review of remote work requests. Here in London, King Charles III had a historic meeting today. His representative in Canada helped organize. Mary Simon, the country's first Indigenous Governor-General, was at the sit-down between the monarch and First Nations, Inuit and Métis leaders at Buckingham Palace, where they tried to forge a path forward in what has been at times a frayed relationship. I spoke with them right after their audience. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. The face-to-face between national Indigenous organization leaders and the King was scheduled for 45 minutes. It lasted an hour. Did he take any ownership for the colonial legacy in your meeting with him?
That wasn't a topic of conversation. There was no explicit mention of colonization as a tool of oppression for Indigenous peoples. But I think implicitly he has heard these stories, and the tone of the meeting was a lot about our strengths and the need for the rest of the world to understand Indigenous peoples in a more full way, and especially the aspects around family, around community, around respect for environment.
One of my elders has told me that relationships are built over 100 cups of tea. And today we had our first cup of tea. And that's going to be our relationship, how it started. And moving forward, we'll see where we can go. And it's important that we recognize what has happened in the past. And we did mention that to the King today, that there will come a time when we have to talk about these things. However, in building relationships, about the more painful aspects, but in building relationships, it takes time to build trust.
The apology from the Pope took years and years and years of advocacy. It didn't happen in the same year that it was asked for. So these kinds of processes where we require accountability and an ownership of a really difficult thing like the devastating impacts of colonization on First Nations people, these are not easy sort of asks, and we don't expect the next day, oh gosh golly gee, you're right. These are processes that are complicated within their system, not ours. We deserve the apology at some point.
And a reminder, our special coverage of the King's coronation this Saturday gets underway at 3 a.m. Eastern, midnight in BC. A dangerous combination of tinder-dry conditions, strong winds, and record-high temperatures is complicating efforts of crews in Alberta, trying to get a handle on more than 70 wildfires currently raging across the province and forcing thousands from their homes. CTV's Alberta Bureau Chief Bill Fortier now on the flames and the fears.
By mid-afternoon, approaching wildfire threatened to cut off barges from the Little Red River Cree Nation, the main escape route from the community.
We only have approximately 30 minutes prior to the barge crossings being overrun.
The Northern Alberta First Nations chief giving regular updates on Facebook.
Fire's out of control.
As local officials worked on getting nearly 4,000 people to safety, even asking anyone with a boat to help.
This is our last-ditch effort.
After taking this video of the fire approaching, Brian Grandjam got out with his grandmother.
I'm worried about the community to get burned down.
That fire is one of dozens burning across the province, at least 17 of them out of control. In central Alberta, this wildfire flared up again today, forcing more evacuations.
There's some damage on this end.
These residents were allowed to return home today after being forced out yesterday. The fire coming dangerously close to their home.
There was like black clouds of smoke, and it was honestly very hellish.
In Banff, wind blew a controlled burn out of control, threatening a hotel and a stable. And even the big cities can't escape the extreme fire risk brought on by dry, hot weather. Several brush fires have started in Edmonton. This one forced the closure of a freeway. Edmonton hit a record 30 degrees today, and above average temperatures are expected to continue for much of the province, making the conditions extremely dry and driving up the risk of more wildfire. Bill Fortier, CTV News, Edmonton.
And those summer-like temperatures are speeding up snowmelt, causing extreme flooding and mudslides in BC. Overflowing waterways in Cache Creek have forced highways to shut down, and more than a dozen properties have been evacuated. In eastern Ontario, high water levels have triggered flood warnings along the Ottawa River. Several communities have declared states of emergency. A Canadian man who escaped the violence in Sudan is telling his harrowing story tonight. He's back in Alberta while fierce fighting is taking place in Khartoum, despite a ceasefire still in effect. CTV's Judy Trin has more on the perilous journey.
This is the building where Colin Crane lived in Khartoum. It was attacked and looted one day after fighting broke out between government forces and militia groups.
We were thinking about survival and how to get out.
Now back in Edmonton, Crane, a mining consultant, is reflecting on the close calls. On the second day of clashes, he moved out of his apartment to a hotel with armed security guards, but the violence followed him. He captured cell phone video of the aftermath of explosions at a nearby shopping mall while hiding in his bathroom.
They used heavy artillery and blasted them all, and then you hear gunfire. This went on for about 15 hours, and then it stopped.
Crane reached out to the embassy for help. Global Affairs initially warned that it cannot advise recommendations for safe transport and cannot guarantee a spot on any specific flight.
We were pretty much on our own. They had told us that.
It took 10 days for evacuation plans to materialize. Allied countries were offering airlifts, but Crane had to get to the airbase on his own. He paid a truck driver $400 US to drive him 25 kilometers. They encountered heavily armed militia. It took 3 hours to clear more than 20 checkpoints. At the airbase, Crane was initially told there was no room for him on a flight because UK citizens were being prioritized on a British airlift. Then a Canadian Hercules plane landed. Crane was flown to safety on Canada's first evacuation flight on April 27th. When Crane was stranded in Khartoum, he had help from his Sudanese co-workers who brought him food and water. Now that Crane is safe, he plans to raise money to help them flee the conflict. Omar.
All right, Judy, thank you. Some high-profile convictions today in connection with the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. 4 members of the far-right militia group, the Proud Boys, were found guilty of seditious conspiracy. After a nearly 4-month trial, a jury found the group's leader, Enrique Tarrio, and 3 others conspired to disrupt the certification of the 2020 election and prevent Joe Biden from becoming president. They could each face up to 20 years in prison. The U.S. was accused by Russia today of playing a role in the alleged drone attack on the Kremlin. Moscow then launched its own response on Ukraine's capital, with air defense systems downing Russian drones in the skies over Kyiv. As CTV's chief international correspondent Paul Workman reports, more Russian retaliation is expected.
A Russian drone flying over Kyiv tonight, a moving speck in the sky suddenly shot down by Ukrainian air defenses. The city has endured 4 attacks in as many days, with more expected, in an escalation of revenge and punishment from Moscow. The spectacle of fiery drones over the Kremlin has aroused disbelief, vigilance, and fear of what might be coming next. The Russians tend to attack their own territory and then blame us, she says. Street signs around the Kremlin declare it to be a no-drone zone. Russia today raised attention by accusing the United States of direct involvement, of essentially orchestrating an audacious attack, if that's in fact what it was, and not an elaborate Russian deception. At any rate, on a pleasant spring day in Moscow, most people seem to shrug it off. We've been strolling by the Kremlin, she says. It's beautiful. The sun is shining. What's the use of trembling? Russian state TV showed President Vladimir Putin on the job, as if to confirm he is alive and fearless. By the same token, Ukraine's president, on a rare foreign visit, brought his demand for justice to the International Criminal Court in The Hague.
We all want to see different Vladimir here, the one who deserves to be sentenced for these criminal actions.
And for Ukraine, that includes yesterday's devastating shelling of civilian targets in the southern city of Kherson. The number of dead has risen to more than 20, killed at the train station, at a supermarket, and in their homes. The drone attack on Kyiv tonight was remarkable because of where it was shot down. Over the center of the city, Omar, exactly where President Zelensky's office is located.
All right, Paul, thanks. Coming up after the break.
It looks like I'm not having to retire from my day job after all.
The ruling that's music to the ears of Ed Sheeran. Plus, a car careens into a house on a quiet Ottawa cul-de-sac. Welcome back to the United Kingdom, the home of many prominent musicians, including Ed Sheeran. But today, the singer was in a Manhattan courthouse where he won a high-profile copyright case. CTV's Los Angeles Bureau Chief Tom Walters on a trial that focused on the fundamentals of music.
Emerging from a New York court today, Ed Sheeran had something to sing about.
Looks like I'm not having to retire from my day job after all.
He had threatened to stop making music if he lost this case, which he called baseless and dangerous. He was sued by Catherine Townsend Griffin, the daughter of Ed Townsend, who co-wrote the 1973 Marvin Gaye classic, Let's Get It On. Griffin claimed parts of her father's song were stolen in Sheeran's 2014 hit, Thinking Out Loud.
Darling, I will be loving you till we're 70.
During the trial, Sheeran performed on the stand to demonstrate the two songs had nothing in common but four similar chords, basic building blocks all songwriters use.
No one owns them, all the way they are played, in the same way that nobody owns the colour blue.
It took jurors a little over 2 hours to decide.
So there was a lot of back and forth. We all just wanted to make sure we were very comfortable with the decision that we were giving.
After the verdict, Sheeran approached Griffin. They spoke for several minutes and hugged, but she left the courthouse without comment. And if Sheeran suspected this case was not really about intellectual property, but property of another kind, he did not hold back.
I am not and will never allow myself to be a piggy bank for anyone to shake.
Now that thinking is out loud and clear. Tom Walters, CTV News, Los Angeles.
Still ahead, why one Welsh town is just not that into the coronation of a former Prince of Wales. The Prince and Princess of Wales ditched the palace for a pub today. First, Will and Kate took the tube down the Elizabeth line, named after the Prince's late grandmother. Then they hit the Dog and Duck pub, and Will pulled a pint of a pale ale appropriately named Kingmaker. Charles, of course, was also once the Prince of Wales. And as CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin found out firsthand, in Wales itself, there is a growing debate about whether that title should exist at all.
Picturesque Carnarvon, perched on the shoreline of Wales, is preparing to all but ignore the King's coronation. Alan Wynne-Jones is the town clerk and a historian.
He's spending public money in a time of huge deprivation within society on a festival of him. It's very strange.
This just outside the mighty castle, once the stage for a lavish ceremony in honor of then Prince Charles. On Canada Day 1969, days before the moon landing, 500 million people watched the investiture of Charles as Prince of Wales.
The symbol of sovereignty. I, Charles, Prince of Wales.
Pomp and circumstance in large part designed to quell growing nationalist sentiment in this part of the UK.
It was just spectacular. It was like for a little girl of 12.
The town's mayor, Maria Sarnatsky, snapped these photos as she stood outside castle walls with her class.
It was a Prince wave to me, and it was just amazing. It was something I'll never, ever forget.
But now she believes the title of Prince of Wales should be abolished. The fortress palace was built in 1283 by Edward I as he battled the Welsh princes. It's now recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, attracting thousands of tourists each year.
We've grown up with it.
Yeah, we've just been
we've grown up with the royals.
But history weighs heavily on many in this town of 10,000 living under the shadow of this castle. To some, it's a towering reminder of imperial military and economic power.
It is a huge symbol of oppression rather than of civic pride.
Dwi'n gobeithio mewn chi mwynhau yn wlad ni.
What did you say?
Welcome to Wales, and I hope you enjoy our country.
Many here say Charles should never have been Prince of Wales, a title first bestowed as a blow to those who were conquered.
But how can you bring an English person into a Welsh country and say that he's a Welsh prince? It's not.
The stone castle has just undergone a 3-year revamp. There's an elevator, it's more accessible now. Modernized, as many here say, the monarchy itself should be. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Carnarvon, Wales.
And back at home, some incredible images from Ottawa tonight where a stolen SUV slammed into a house. Fortunately, no one was seriously injured. A doorbell cam across the street caught the moment of impact as the car crashed through the front door. The 17-year-old driver was able to get out on her own and was taken to hospital. Incredible. After the break, the season ticket holder and his daughter who love to root against the home team. A father and daughter bonding experience between a pair of Toronto Maple Leafs season ticket holders has turned them into online sensations. But it's not their support of the blue and white that's caught the attention of the hockey world. In fact, it's just the opposite. CTV's John Vanavelli-Rao explains.
While the pictures from Toronto would suggest everyone living in the city is pulling for their beloved Leafs, this father-daughter duo has other ideas.
It's all nothing good fun.
And what they consider fun.
He shoots and scores!
First got noticed this week when the pair were seen at Scotiabank Arena wearing Panthers jerseys. Then someone on the internet pointed out during the playoffs' first round, the same two were in Toronto supporting Tampa.
And it turns out that they hate the Leafs more than anyone.
People then clued in that the dad seemed to have been at every Leafs home game supporting their opponent.
This all started many moons ago, way back at Maple Leaf Gardens.
It turns out ticket broker Ervil DeGiusto adores hockey. Since he was a kid, he's been a Habs fan. And living in Toronto back in the mid-90s was less than impressed by the Leafs.
I'm in Toronto, so I'm watching Toronto, but they're not very good. So I decided to wear the visitor shirt every game.
And as a Leafs season's ticket holder, he's been to hundreds of games, always supporting their opponents. For the last 2 years, joined by his daughter.
It's really been a great bonding experience with my dad.
Some marveling at the fact they're paying to root against Toronto, and Leaf haters around the league loving it.
Go Cats, go!
For the record, among Ervil's collection, he does have a Leafs jersey.
I was given one as a gift, but I've never worn it.
To the net, scores! The pair says they actually want the Leafs to make it to the next round and have New Jersey and Carolina shirts ready.
Either one's ready to come out.
And if the Leafs won the cup, these ultimate trolls think that'd still be great.
We're not going to go to the parade, though, because I don't think we'd be welcome. But
You could sure call that an understatement. John Vanavelli-Rao, CTV News, Toronto.
At least it's all in good fun, and they're probably cheering tonight. It was a tough night for the Leafs, who lost to Florida tonight. That's a snapshot of this Thursday from London. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and see you tomorrow.